Consider the story of the cow and the bison. When a cow sees a storm approaching, its instinct is to flee. But because it runs in the same direction the storm is moving, the storm constantly chases it. This prolongs the fear and the downpour, allowing the misery to settle deep and linger within its chest. The bison, however, chooses a different path. When it sees the dark clouds gathering, it lowers its head and charges head-on directly into the storm. Because it moves straight through the heart of the storm passes quickly, leaving the bison standing strong, dry, and unburdened on the other side. Let me tell you something that nobody's gonna say to you. The single greatest trait you can train in yourself isn't discipline, focus, or communication. It's learning how to be in a good mood for no reason. And I promise you, once you truly get it, you will never look at your emotional state the same way again. Here's the deal with most people. They have outsourced their happiness. They have essentially handed it to the world and said, here, you decide when I get to feel good. And the world, being the chaotic, unpredictable, completely indifferent place that it is, holds that happiness hostage. So they wait. They wait for the raise, they wait for the relationship to get better, they wait for circumstances to align, and every single morning before they even decide how they feel, they scan their environment first, like checking the weather app. What's going on outside? Okay, based on that, here's how I feel today. And here's the insidious part. People genuinely believe that the sequence goes, good things happen first, then you feel good. But that is completely backwards. People who feel good are the ones who go get the good things. There's a law in physics that basically says, when you have energy that is vibrating at a particular frequency for 17 seconds, other energy like that will be attracted to it. If you keep feeding it, layering those 17-second intervals on top of each other, you create a massive snowball effect. All of our emotions have a particular frequency. If you're in despair, anger, or feeling resentful, all of those are lower, denser frequencies. You get into happiness, contentment, joy, those are higher, denser frequencies. Let's say your usual baseline is peace. You're coasting along just fine, but right before you leave for work, you spill coffee all over your fresh shirt. All of a sudden, you're irritated and vibrating in a lower, denser frequency. Instead of letting it go, you walk into the office and immediately went to a colleague about your terrible morning. And then you text your partner to complain about it some more. What are you really doing here? You are keeping that low, frustrated vibration alive and well. Now when you go to a supermarket and there is somebody in line ahead of you with 38 items and you got 3, and the guy at the cash register, it's his first day and he's not doing very well. He's slow. Is that a random streak of bad luck? Nope. It's something for you to get angry about. Your environment is simply serving you scenarios that perfectly match the frustrated energy you've been broadcasting. The mood builds the outcomes, not the other way around. Now, before we go any further, I have to be precise here because this idea gets butchered constantly. A good mood for no reason is not delusional positivity. It is not pretending the hard things don't exist or slapping a smile over your grief and calling it healing. What it is this: a conscious, sovereign decision. You acknowledge reality, the full weight of it, the difficulty of it, the sting of it, and then you deliberately choose your internal posture anyway. You are not a fool who doesn't see the storm. You're someone who has decided not to let the storm move into your chest. Consider the story of the cow and the bison. When a cow sees a storm approaching, its instinct is to flee. But because it runs in the same direction the storm is moving, the storm constantly chases it. This prolongs the fear and the downpour, allowing the misery to settle deep and linger within its chest. The bison, however, chooses a different path. When it sees the dark clouds gathering, it lowers its head and charges head-on directly into the storm. Because it moves straight through the heart of the storm passes quickly, leaving the bison standing strong, dry, and unburdened on the other side. When you truly understand this, you realize you actually get to choose how you feel, and then you exercise that choice. Because think about what freedom actually means. It doesn't mean nothing bad happens to you. It means nothing bad can possess you. Now here's where this thing gets really interesting. Because this idea of internal sovereignty isn't a modern self-help concept. It isn't something that came from a TED Talk or a productivity podcast. It is one of the most thoroughly developed ideas in the classical Islamic theology, and the depth of it will genuinely shock you. Let's start with something Imam Ibn al-Qayyim said about sadness, and this is remarkable from a linguistic standpoint. He noted that in the entire Quran, the word husn, meaning sadness, does not appear a single time except in one of two forms, either as a prohibition or as a negation. Not once does the Quran validate sadness as a spiritual state worth staying in. Every single reference either says do not grieve or describes grieving as something that has been removed. Because sadness has no intrinsic spiritual utility. It doesn't repair the past, it doesn't secure the future. What it does do, consistently and reliably, is weaken the heart's resolve and stops you from moving forward. It paralyzes you, and a paralyzed believer cannot fulfill their purpose. This is not the Quran telling you not to feel pain. Feeling is human. Collapsing into it is a choice, and Islam draws that distinction with surgical precision. The Prophet ﷺ used to seek refuge from 8 specific ailments, and the way he paired them reveals something profound about the architecture of human suffering. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-husn wal-ajzi wal-kasl wal-bukhli wal-jubn wa dala'i ad-dayni wa ghalabat ar-rijal. O Allah, I seek refuge in you from worry and sorrow, from weakness and laziness, from cowardice and miserliness, and from being heavily in debt and being overpowered by men. Notice, worry and sorrow are paired first because they represent two directions of psychological pain. Husn, meaning sorrow, is pain rooted in the past, something you lost, something that didn't go the way it should have, a wound that keeps reopening every time you replay the memory. Hum, meaning worry, is pain rooted in the future, a threat that hasn't happened yet, a scenario your mind keeps constructing and then reacting to as if it's already real. Together, they grip the present moment from both sides, the past pulling you back, the future pulling you forward, and you never actually live in the now. The prophetic prescription is to be free from both, not numb, not in denial, free, present. In that state of active presence, that's where you can actually seek the pleasure of Allah and take constructive action. That is the baseline the believer is meant to operate from. Here's a question I want you to sit with. What exactly are you anxious about? Almost certainly, it's something that hasn't happened yet, a future scenario, a potential loss, a feared outcome. Here is what Islamic metaphysics says about that. The future is part of the unseen, al-Ghaib, and Allah states unequivocally in Surah Luqman. The classical interpretation emphasized that this restriction is absolute. Not even the closest angels, not even the sent messengers, no created entity has access to this information except through explicit divine revelation. Now here's the logical conclusion. If the future is structurally unknowable to every created being, including yourself, including Satan, then any thought you have about future catastrophe is not a fact. It is a speculative illusion. You are literally choosing to feel pain about something that doesn't exist in a timeline you cannot access based on information you categorically do not have. Now, who benefits from you living in that state? The Prophet ﷺ described two influences that constantly play on the human heart. He called them lammatan, two touches, two impressions. Satan exercises his influence upon the son of Adam, and so does the angel exercise his influence. The influence of Satan is that he holds the promise of evil and the denial of truth, and the influence of the angel is that he holds the promise of good and the affirmation of truth. When you start worrying about ending up broke down the road, that is not an objective assessment. That is a satanic threat designed to induce fear, designed to make you stingy, paralyzed, and desperate. And Ibn al-Qayyim, the great scholar, laid out exactly what to do with it. He said, repel the thought, for if you don't, it becomes an idea. Repel the idea, for if you don't, it becomes a desire. Fight against it, for if you don't, it becomes a determination and a passion. And if you don't repel that, it becomes an action. The entire cascade from a single whispered fear to a life built on scarcity and anxiety starts with one thought you chose not to repel. That is the cost of not choosing your mood. There is a Hadith Qudsi, which is a divine narration spoken by Allah through the Prophet that says, I am as my servant thinks of me. If he thinks good of me, he will have it. If he thinks evil of me, he will have it. And another narration completes the picture. When a person is ill and near death, Allah commands, do not let my servant have any expectation of me except good. This is the spiritual science of husn al-zann billah, having an optimistic expectation of God. A chronic state of worry and pessimism is not just a mental health issue. It is a form of negative expectation that spiritually blocks the descent of blessings. You are effectively telling the divine, I don't expect good from you. And by divine law, that's exactly what you get.